My name is Parker, and this is my story about how I discovered the truth about my wife Amanda after 15 years of marriage. We lived in a quiet suburb of Columbus, Ohio, where I worked as a construction foreman for a mid-sized building company, and she was a marketing coordinator at a local healthcare firm. Our life seemed perfect from the outside. We had a beautiful two-story colonial house with a white picket fence, 2 cars in the driveway, and were planning to start a family soon. Amanda was 32, I was 35, and we'd been trying to have kids for about 2 years without success. The fertility treatments were expensive and emotionally draining, but we were committed to making it work. Everything began to unravel last September when Amanda got a promotion at work. She was now the senior marketing coordinator, which came with a significant salary increase but also much more responsibility. Her new position required her to work closely with the regional director, a man named Blake Morrison who had just transferred from the Chicago office. At first I was thrilled for Amanda. She'd worked so hard for this opportunity, often staying late at the office and taking on extra projects. The promotion meant we could finally afford the fertility treatments without dipping into our savings, and maybe even think about that vacation to Europe we'd been planning for years. Blake seemed like a decent guy when I first met him at the company Christmas party in December. He was probably in his early 40s, well-dressed, confident, the typical corporate executive type. He made polite conversation, asked about my work in construction, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. Amanda spoke highly of him, saying he was a brilliant strategist and that she was learning so much from working with him. The first sign that something was off came in January. Amanda started mentioning Blake more frequently in our conversations. Blake thinks we should restructure the campaign this way, or Blake suggested I attend this conference in Cincinnati. I didn't think much of it initially. She was excited about her new role and clearly respected his professional opinion. But then the late nights started becoming more frequent. Amanda would call around 5:30, just as I was finishing up at whatever construction site I was working on, to tell me she'd be home late. Blake wants to review the quarterly projections, or we have a client presentation tomorrow and need to perfect it. I understood. I'd had my share of demanding bosses who expected overtime. In February, Amanda announced that she'd be traveling more for work. The company was expanding into new markets, and Blake wanted her to lead site visits to potential new locations. First, it was a 3-day trip to Indianapolis, then Nashville, then Louisville. Each time, she'd return exhausted but exhilarated, talking about the opportunities and challenges they'd discovered. What started to bother me wasn't the travel itself, but how secretive she became about the details. When I'd ask specific questions about the trips, which hotels they stayed at, which clients they met with, what the cities were like, she'd give vague answers and quickly change the subject. She'd also become protective of her phone, something she'd never been before. One evening in March, I decided to surprise her with dinner when she got home from one of these late nights. I'd stopped by her favorite Thai restaurant and picked up pad thai and spring rolls. When she walked in around 9:30, she seemed startled to see me waiting with the food laid out on our dining room table. "This is so sweet," she said, but her smile seemed forced. "I'm actually not very hungry though. We ordered pizza at the office while we were working." I asked who "we" was and she said it was her, Blake, and a couple of other team members. But when I mentioned that I'd driven past her office building around 7:30 to check if her car was still there, which it wasn't, she got defensive. "Maybe you saw wrong," she said. "Or maybe we moved to a different location to work. Blake sometimes likes to work from coffee shops when we need to brainstorm." The explanation felt hollow, but I didn't want to seem like I was interrogating her. Trust had always been the foundation of our relationship, and I didn't want to become the kind of husband who questioned his wife's every move. April brought more changes. Amanda started going to the gym after work, something she'd never done consistently before. She said Blake had convinced several people at the office to join his fitness group, and that they were training for a 5K charity run. She'd come home around 8 or 9, showered and energetic, talking about her workout. I suggested joining her a few times, thinking it might be fun to exercise together, but she always had excuses. "It's really just for people from work," or "we're at different fitness levels," or "Blake has already structured the training program for our specific group." One Saturday morning, she left early saying she was meeting the group for a long training run. I decided to surprise her by showing up with coffee and donuts for everyone. I drove to the park where she said they usually met, but there was no sign of any fitness group. I waited for an hour, thinking maybe I'd gotten the location wrong, but Amanda never showed up. When she got home around noon, sweaty and in her running clothes, I asked how the run went. She said it was great, that they'd done 8 miles through some trails on the outskirts of town. When I mentioned that I'd stopped by the park with coffee, her face went pale. "Oh, we changed locations last minute," she said quickly. "Blake got a text about construction at the usual spot, so we drove to a different trail system." She went upstairs to shower before I could ask any more questions. That night, I lay awake thinking about all the small inconsistencies that had been piling up over the past few months. Individually, each one could be explained away, but together they formed a pattern that made me deeply uncomfortable. The breaking point came in early May. Amanda announced that she'd be going on a week-long business trip to Atlanta to help open a new regional office. She seemed excited about the opportunity, saying it would look great on her resume and might lead to another promotion. "Will Blake be going too?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Yes, along with Jennifer from HR and Marcus from finance," she replied. "It's going to be a lot of work, but also a great learning experience." The night before she left, I helped her pack. As she was folding clothes into her suitcase, I noticed she was including some items that seemed more appropriate for a romantic getaway than a business trip. A new silk nightgown I'd never seen before, a pair of expensive heels, and a dress that she usually saved for special occasions. "That's a beautiful dress," I commented. "Is there a formal dinner planned?" She paused for a moment, then said, "Blake mentioned there might be some client entertainment, so I wanted to be prepared." After she left the next morning, I couldn't concentrate on work. My crew probably thought I was losing my mind. I kept making mistakes on measurements and forgetting which tasks I'd assigned to whom. During my lunch break, I made a decision that I'm still not sure was right or wrong. I called Amanda's office and asked to speak with Jennifer from HR. When she came to the phone, I explained that I was trying to reach my wife but couldn't remember which hotel she was staying at in Atlanta. "I'm sorry," Jennifer said, sounding confused. "Amanda's in Atlanta? I'm here at the office. There's no business trip to Atlanta that I'm aware of." My heart started pounding. I thanked Jennifer and hung up, then immediately called Marcus in finance. Same story, he was at the office and knew nothing about any trip to Atlanta. I sat in my truck in the construction site parking lot, staring at my phone. Every rational explanation I tried to come up with crumbled under the weight of the evidence. Amanda wasn't in Atlanta on business. She was somewhere else, with Blake lying to me about everything. That evening, I did something I never thought I'd do. I drove to Blake's neighborhood. I'd gotten his address from the company directory that Amanda had left on her desk at home. His house was dark and his car wasn't in the driveway. I sat there for an hour, feeling like a stalker, before finally driving home. The next few days were torture. Amanda would call me every evening from Atlanta, telling me about the meetings she'd had and the progress they were making on the new office. Her voice sounded different, lighter, happier than it had in months. She was clearly having a wonderful time, just not doing what she told me she was doing. On Thursday, I made another decision that changed everything. I called in sick to work and drove to the Columbus airport. If Amanda was really coming back from Atlanta on Friday evening like she'd said, she'd be flying into Columbus. I planned to surprise her, to see the look on her face when she saw me waiting. I spent 6 hours at the airport on Friday watching every flight from Atlanta. Amanda never appeared. When she called me that evening to say her flight had been delayed and she'd be getting in late, I knew beyond any doubt that she was lying. She came home Saturday morning, looking relaxed and happy, with a slight tan that she claimed came from walking between buildings in the Atlanta sun. She had stories about the new office, about the challenges they'd faced, about how proud Blake was of the work they'd accomplished. I listened to every word, feeling like I was watching a performance. This woman I'd loved and trusted for 15 years was sitting across from me at our kitchen table, drinking coffee from the mug I'd given her for our anniversary, spinning an elaborate fiction about how she'd spent the past week. "How was Blake's presentation to the Atlanta clients?" I asked, testing her. "Oh, it went really well," she said without hesitation. "He's such a natural speaker." The clients were impressed. "And Jennifer, how did she handle the HR setup?" "She was fantastic. Really on top of everything." Each lie came so easily, so naturally. I wondered how long this had been going on, how many other business trips and late nights and gym sessions had been fabrications. That weekend, Amanda was more affectionate than she'd been in months. She wanted to make love Saturday night and again Sunday morning. She suggested we go out for brunch, something we hadn't done in ages. She seemed genuinely happy to be home with me, which made everything even more confusing and painful. On Monday, while Amanda was at work, I made a decision that would change both our lives forever. I hired a private investigator named Ray Kowalski, a former police detective who specialized in marital investigations. I felt disgusted with myself for even making the call, but I needed to know the truth. Ray was professional and understanding. He explained his process, his fees, and what kind of evidence he typically found in cases like mine. He said he'd need about a week to gather preliminary information, and that most of his work would involve surveillance and background checks. "Mr. Reynolds," he said as I was leaving his office, "I need to prepare you for the possibility that your suspicions are correct. In my experience, when someone goes to the lengths your wife has gone to maintain deception, the infidelity is usually more extensive than the betrayed spouse initially realizes." Those words haunted me for the next week. I went through the motions of normal life, going to work, eating dinner with Amanda, watching TV together in the evenings, but inside I felt like I was slowly dying. Every time she smiled at me, every time she said she loved me, I wondered if it was real or just part of the performance. Amanda continued her routine of late nights and gym sessions. She mentioned that Blake was impressed with her work on the Atlanta project and was considering her for a regional manager position. She was bubbling with excitement about the possibility, talking about how it would mean more money, more responsibility, more travel. "Blake thinks I have real leadership potential," she said one evening. "He's been mentoring me, helping me develop skills I didn't even know I had." I bit back the response that came to mind and just nodded supportively. The following Friday, Ray called me at work. His voice was grim. "Mr. Reynolds, I have the information you requested. Can you meet me at my office this afternoon?" I left the construction site early, telling my crew I had a family emergency. In a way, I suppose I did. Ray's office was small and cluttered, with filing cabinets lining the walls and a desk covered in photographs and documents. He gestured for me to sit down, then opened a manila folder. "I'm going to be direct with you," he said. "Your wife is having an affair with Blake Morrison. It's been going on for at least 4 months, possibly longer." He slid a stack of photographs across the desk. The first few showed Amanda and Blake entering and leaving various hotels and restaurants. They were holding hands, kissing, behaving like lovers. But it was the next set of photos that hit me like a physical blow. They showed Amanda and Blake at what appeared to be a real estate office, looking at papers with an agent. In one photo, Amanda was pointing at something in a brochure while Blake had his arm around her waist. "They're looking at condos in Cincinnati," Ray explained. "According to my sources, Blake's been telling people at work that he's planning to relocate there and open a new branch office. It appears your wife is planning to go with him." I stared at the photos, feeling numb. This wasn't just an affair. Amanda was planning to leave me entirely. She was building a new life with Blake while pretending everything was normal at home. "There's more," Ray continued. "I did some digging into Blake Morrison's background. This isn't his first time. He was transferred from Chicago after having an affair with a married subordinate there. Before that, he was in Detroit where something similar happened. He has a pattern of pursuing married women who work under him." The room seemed to spin around me. Not only was my wife cheating, but she was involved with a man who made a habit of destroying marriages. She wasn't special to him, she was just his latest conquest. "What about the Atlanta trip?" I asked. "They spent the week at a resort in the Smoky Mountains. Registered as Mr. and Mrs. Morrison." Ray's voice was gentle, but the words cut deep. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reynolds." I sat in that office for another hour, going through all the evidence Ray had collected. Phone records showing hundreds of calls and texts between Amanda and Blake. Credit card receipts from romantic restaurants and hotels. Even photos of them at furniture stores apparently planning their new home together. When I finally left Ray's office, I felt like a completely different person than the one who had walked in. The man who entered still had hoped that this was all a misunderstanding, that there was an innocent explanation. The man who left knew that his marriage was over, had probably been over for months while he'd been living in ignorant bliss. I drove around Columbus for hours, not ready to go home and face Amanda. I ended up at a bar I'd never been to before, where I sat alone and drank beer while trying to figure out what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront Amanda immediately, to throw the photos on the table and demand an explanation. But another part of me wanted to plan my response carefully, to make sure I protected myself legally and financially. By the time I got home, it was almost midnight. Amanda was asleep or pretending to be. I lay awake beside her, studying her face in the dim light from the street lamp outside our window. This woman I'd shared a bed with for 15 years was a stranger to me now. Everything I thought I knew about her, about us, about our life together, had been a lie. The next morning was Saturday, and Amanda was in an unusually good mood. She made pancakes for breakfast and talked about her plans for the weekend. Shopping with her sister, then meeting some friends for drinks that evening. Each activity was probably another lie, another opportunity to see Blake. "Blake invited a few people from work to a barbecue at his place tomorrow afternoon," she said casually. Would you like to come? It might be fun to get to know my colleagues better. The audacity was breathtaking. She was inviting me to a social event with her lover, probably thinking it would provide perfect cover for their affair. I wondered if Blake found it amusing, playing the gracious host to the husband of the woman he was sleeping with. I'll think about it, I said, keeping my voice neutral. That afternoon, while Amanda was supposedly shopping with her sister, I made several phone calls. First, I called a divorce attorney that Ray had recommended. Then I contacted my bank to understand our joint accounts and assets. Finally, I called my brother Jake, who lived in Denver, to let him know what was happening. Jake was furious on my behalf. "Parker, I never trusted that woman," he said. "Remember how she acted at Mom's funeral? More concerned about how she looked in her dress than comforting you." I didn't remember Amanda being particularly selfish at Mom's funeral, but Jake had never liked her. He'd always thought she was too focused on appearances and social status. Maybe he'd seen something I'd been blind to. "What are you going to do?" Jake asked. "I'm not sure yet. I need to be smart about this. We own the house together, we have joint accounts, and she makes almost as much money as I do. I can't just kick her out and change the locks. Do you want me to come out there? I can take some time off work." "Not yet. Let me figure out my next steps first." That evening, Amanda came home from her drinks with friends, looking radiant. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair was slightly messed up, and she had the satisfied look of someone who'd spent the afternoon in bed with her lover. "How was your day?" she asked, kissing me on the cheek. "Quiet. I mostly just worked on some projects around the house." "That's nice. You work so hard during the week, it's good for you to relax on weekends." The concern in her voice sounded genuine, which made everything worse. How could she compartmentalize so effectively? How could she act like a loving wife when she was planning to abandon me for another man? Sunday arrived, and Amanda reminded me about Blake's barbecue. I surprised her by saying I'd like to go. "Really?" she said, looking pleased but also slightly nervous. "That's great. Blake will be so happy to meet you properly." I spent the morning imagining how the afternoon would unfold. Would Blake be able to look me in the eye while shaking my hand? Would Amanda be able to act naturally around both of us? Would any of their colleagues suspect what was really going on? Blake's house was in an upscale subdivision about 20 minutes from ours. It was larger than our place, with a perfectly manicured lawn and expensive cars in the driveway. As we walked up to the front door, Amanda squeezed my hand. "I'm so glad you decided to come," she said. "It means a lot to me that you're interested in meeting the people I work with." Blake answered the door with a big smile and a firm handshake. "Parker, so good to see you again. Amanda talks about you all the time." He was smooth, I had to give him that. If I hadn't seen the photos of him with his tongue down my wife's throat, I might have thought he was just a friendly colleague. He introduced me to the other guests, about a dozen people from their office, all with spouses or partners. As the afternoon progressed, I watched Blake and Amanda interact. They were careful not to be too obvious, but there were subtle signs everywhere. The way their eyes met across the patio. How Blake's hand briefly touched Amanda's back when he passed behind her chair. The private smile they shared when someone made a joke. But what struck me most was how at ease Amanda seemed. She wasn't nervous or guilty. She was in her element, playing the perfect corporate wife while carrying on an affair right in front of me. She laughed at Blake's stories, complimented his house, and fit seamlessly into his social circle. "Your wife is incredibly talented," Blake said to me during a quiet moment. "I hope you know how lucky you are." "Oh, I'm beginning to understand just how special Amanda is," I replied, watching his face for any reaction. If he caught the double meaning in my words, he didn't show it. On the drive home, Amanda was chatty and happy. "That was so much fun," she said. "Blake's house is beautiful, isn't it? And everyone was so welcoming." "He seems very fond of you," I observed. "He's a great boss. Supportive, encouraging, he really believes in developing his team members." "I'm sure he does," I thought. That night, Amanda initiated sex for the second time in a week. As she moved above me in our bed, I found myself wondering if she was thinking about Blake, if she was comparing us, if she was already mentally checked out of our marriage. The physical intimacy that had once been a source of connection and pleasure now felt like another layer of deception. Monday morning, I made my decision. Instead of going to work, I drove to my attorney's office for a consultation. Margaret Chin was a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in divorce law. She listened to my story without judgment, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. "Do you want to try to save your marriage?" she asked. "Some couples can work through infidelity with counseling and commitment from both parties." "She's not just cheating," I explained. She's building a new life with this man. Looking at apartments, planning a future together. This isn't a mistake or a moment of weakness, it's a calculated decision to leave me while keeping me as a safety net. Margaret nodded. In that case, we need to move quickly to protect your interests. Ohio is a no-fault divorce state, so the infidelity won't impact the legal proceedings, but we want to make sure all assets are properly documented before she has a chance to hide anything. We spent 2 hours going over my finances, property, and options. Margaret explained that since Amanda and I had similar incomes and no children, the division would likely be straightforward, but that I should prepare for the process to take several months. How do you want to handle telling her? Margaret asked. I haven't decided yet. Part of me wants to confront her with the evidence and give her a chance to explain. But I don't think there's any explanation that would change anything. In my experience, confrontation rarely leads to honest conversation in these situations. She's already proven she's capable of extensive deception. Anything she tells you at this point has to be viewed through that lens. Over the next few days, I found myself studying Amanda like she was a puzzle I was trying to solve. How had I missed the signs for so long? Looking back, I could see small changes that had occurred over the past year. She'd started paying more attention to her appearance, buying new clothes and getting her hair done more frequently. She'd become more interested in social media, constantly checking her phone. She'd developed new opinions about movies and music, probably reflecting Blake's tastes. But she'd also become more attentive to me in some ways, more affectionate and considerate. I realized this was probably guilt-driven behavior, her way of justifying her affair by being a better wife in other areas. Thursday evening, Amanda announced another business trip. This time, she said, she and Blake would be visiting potential clients in Indianapolis for 3 days. I know I've been traveling a lot lately, she said, seeming almost apologetic. But Blake thinks these face-to-face meetings are crucial for expanding our market share. After this trip, things should calm down. I doubted that. According to Ray's investigation, Blake was planning to relocate to Cincinnati within the next few months. These business trips were probably house-hunting expeditions or romantic getaways before they made their move. When do you leave? I asked. Friday morning. We'll be back Sunday evening. I'll miss you, I said and meant it. Despite everything, despite the lies and betrayal and deception, part of me still loved the woman Amanda used to be, or the woman I thought she was. Friday morning, I helped Amanda load her suitcase into her car. She kissed me goodbye, told me she loved me and promised to call that evening. I watched her drive away, knowing it would probably be one of the last times I'd see her as my wife. That afternoon I put my plan into action. I'd taken the day off work, telling my crew chief that I had personal business to handle. First, I went to the bank and opened a separate checking account, transferring half of our joint savings as Margaret had advised. Then I drove to a storage unit I'd rented and moved some of my most important possessions there, family photos, important documents, and sentimental items I couldn't risk losing. Finally, I went home and packed several suitcases with Amanda's belongings. Not everything, just enough to make it clear that our living arrangement was changing. I left them by the front door, along with printed copies of Ray's surveillance photos and a note explaining that I knew about her affair with Blake. The note was simple: Amanda, I know about you and Blake. I've filed for divorce. Please collect your belongings and find somewhere else to stay while we sort out the details. Parker. Then I left. I drove to a hotel across town and checked in for the weekend, turning off my phone so I wouldn't be tempted to answer when Amanda inevitably called. I spent Saturday and Sunday in a strange state of suspended animation. I felt relieved, devastated, angry, and sad all at once. I'd taken control of the situation, but I'd also destroyed my marriage and possibly ruined any chance of reconciliation. Not that reconciliation seemed possible given the extent of Amanda's deception, but ending things this way felt final in a way that scared me. Sunday evening I drove home. Amanda's car was in the driveway and I could see lights on in the house. I sat in my truck for several minutes, gathering courage before finally going inside. Amanda was sitting at our kitchen table, still in the clothes she'd worn for her fake business trip. Her eyes were red from crying, and the surveillance photos were spread out in front of her. She looked up when I walked in and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Parker, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can explain. Can you? I asked, sitting down across from her. Can you explain why you've been lying to me for months? Can you explain why you're looking at apartments with Blake? Can you explain why you spent last week at a resort in Tennessee while telling me you were in Atlanta? Her face crumpled and she started crying harder. I never meant for this to happen. Blake and we just connected in a way that I didn't expect. But I love you, Parker. I've always loved you. If you loved me, you would have talked to me about whatever problems we were having instead of starting a secret relationship with your boss. We weren't having problems, she said. That's what made this so confusing. You're a wonderful husband. You've given me everything I thought I wanted. But Blake gives you something I don't? She was quiet for a long moment. He makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years. Like I'm interesting and desirable and capable of more than I ever imagined. Her honesty was like a knife to the chest, but I appreciated it more than the lies she'd been telling. So you decided to build a new life with him while keeping me as a backup plan? It wasn't like that. I was trying to figure out what I wanted. I thought maybe if I could just explore these feelings I could get them out of my system and things could go back to normal. By explore these feelings, you mean have an affair and plan to move to Cincinnati with him? Her face went pale. How do you know about Cincinnati? I hired a private investigator, Amanda. I know everything. The hotels, the house hunting, Blake's history of affairs with married subordinates. You're not special to him, you're just his latest conquest. That seemed to hurt her more than anything else I'd said. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. He loves me, she said weakly. Does he? Or does he love the thrill of stealing another man's wife? What happens when you're divorced and available? Will you still be exciting to him then? We talked for another hour, going in circles. Amanda alternated between apologizing, justifying her actions, and trying to convince me that we could work things out. But her arguments felt hollow, probably because she didn't really believe them herself. Finally, she asked the question I'd been dreading. What do you want from me, Parker? What would it take for you to forgive me? I want you to end things with Blake immediately and permanently. I want you to find a new job so you never have to see him again. I want you to be completely transparent with me about where you go and who you're with. I want you to go to marriage counseling with me for as long as it takes to rebuild trust. She was quiet for a long time. And if I can't do all that? Then we get divorced, divide our assets, and try to move on with our lives. I need time to think, she said. How much time? I don't know. A few days, maybe a week. You can think at your sister's place or at a hotel or wherever you want. But not here. Not while you're still involved with Blake. She nodded and went upstairs to pack more of her belongings. I sat at the kitchen table looking at the surveillance photos and wondering if I was being too harsh. Maybe I should have been willing to work through this gradually, to give her more time to end things with Blake and recommit to our marriage. But then I remembered the photos of them at the real estate office, the receipts from romantic dinners, the elaborate lies she'd constructed to cover her tracks. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a systematic betrayal that had been going on for months. When Amanda came back downstairs with 2 more suitcases, she paused at the front door. I'm sorry, Parker. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I truly am sorry. You deserve better than what I've given you. After she left, I sat alone in our house, surrounded by the remnants of our life together. Wedding photos on the mantel, furniture we'd picked out together, the kitchen where we'd shared thousands of meals. Everything looked the same, but it all felt different now, tainted by the knowledge of Amanda's deception. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and painful conversations. Amanda chose Blake over our marriage as I'd expected she would. She gave her notice at work, ostensibly to avoid the awkwardness of continuing to work together, but I suspected she and Blake had already made plans to relocate together. Margaret handled the divorce proceedings efficiently. Since Amanda didn't contest anything and we had no children or complicated assets, the process moved relatively quickly. She got half the house equity, half our savings, and her car. I kept the house, my truck, and my construction business. The hardest part wasn't the legal or financial aspects, it was the social fallout. Some of our mutual friends took sides or felt compelled to share their opinions about what had happened. Amanda's family was predictably upset with me for not fighting harder to save the marriage. My family was supportive but also frustrated that I'd been so blind to what was happening. 3 months after I'd confronted Amanda, the divorce was finalized. She and Blake had indeed moved to Cincinnati, where he'd taken a position as regional director for a different healthcare company. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they were living together in a downtown condo and seemed happy. I tried to feel angry about their apparent happiness, but mostly I just felt empty. The life I'd built over 15 years was gone, and I wasn't sure how to start over at 35. My construction business kept me busy during the day, which was a blessing. Physical work was therapeutic, and my crew was supportive without being intrusive. They knew I was going through a divorce but didn't pry for details. Evenings and weekends were harder. The house felt too big and too quiet. I'd catch myself setting 2 plates for dinner or buying Amanda's favorite yogurt at the grocery store. I started going out more, dinners with friends, movies, even a few dates that friends had arranged. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Jennifer from Amanda's old HR department at a coffee shop. She recognized me and came over to say hello. "I heard about you and Amanda," she said gently. "I'm really sorry." "Thank you. These things happen, I guess." "Actually," Jennifer hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "There's something you should know. Blake Morrison was fired about 2 months ago." I looked up from my coffee, surprised. "Really? What happened?" "He was caught having an inappropriate relationship with another employee, a married woman in the accounting department. The company has a strict policy about supervisors dating subordinates, especially when one of them is married. So Blake had moved on to his next conquest, just as I'd predicted. I wondered if Amanda knew or if she was still living with him in Cincinnati, unaware that he was already pursuing someone else. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this," Jennifer continued, "but Amanda called me last week. She sounded really upset. I think things aren't going well for her." Part of me wanted to know more, but a larger part of me realized it didn't matter. Whatever problems Amanda was facing with Blake were no longer my concern. I'd spent too much energy over the past months thinking about them, wondering if they were happy together, hoping for some kind of cosmic justice. "Thank you for telling me," I said to Jennifer. "But Amanda's not my responsibility anymore." And for the first time since I'd discovered the affair, I truly meant it. I wasn't responsible for Amanda's happiness or her mistakes. I couldn't save her from Blake or from her own poor judgment. All I could do was focus on building a new life for myself. A year later I sold the house. It had too many memories and I was ready for a fresh start. I bought a smaller place across town and used some of the equity to expand my construction business. I hired 2 more employees and started taking on larger commercial projects. I also started dating seriously for the first time since the divorce. Her name was Rachel, and she was a nurse at Columbus General Hospital. We met at a charity fundraiser that my brother had convinced me to attend. She was divorced too, with 2 young kids, and she understood the challenges of starting over in your 30s. Rachel was nothing like Amanda. She was practical, straightforward, and completely uninterested in playing games or keeping secrets. When she said she'd call, she called. When she made plans, she kept them. After months of Amanda's deception, Rachel's honesty was like fresh air. One evening, about 18 months after my divorce was finalized, Rachel and I were making dinner together in my kitchen when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something made me pick it up. "Parker?" The voice was familiar but broken, desperate in a way that made my stomach clench. "It's Amanda." Rachel looked up from the salad she was preparing, raising an eyebrow in question. I stepped into the living room for privacy. "What do you want, Amanda?" I made a terrible mistake. Blake left me 3 months ago. He's engaged to someone else now, someone from his new company. I lost my job, I can't afford the condo payments, and Her voice broke into sobs. "I don't know what to do." For a moment, I felt the old instinct to comfort her, to solve her problems, to be the steady, reliable husband I'd always been. But then I looked through the kitchen doorway at Rachel, who was humming softly while she cooked, and I remembered what real partnership looked like. "I'm sorry to hear you're having a hard time," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "But I can't help you, Amanda. We're divorced. You made your choice. Please, Parker. I know I hurt you, but couldn't we at least talk? Maybe meet for coffee?" I realize now what a fool I was. You were the best thing in my life, and I threw it away for someone who never really cared about me. The desperation in her voice was heartbreaking, but it was also familiar. This was the same woman who had looked me in the eye for months while carrying on an elaborate affair. The same woman who had planned a future with another man while sleeping in my bed. Her regret was real, but it was based on circumstances, not genuine remorse. "Amanda, I hope you figure things out. I really do. But whatever problems you're facing now, I can't be part of the solution. You need to build a new life on your own, just like I did." "But I still love you," she whispered. "No, you don't. You love the security I represented. You love the idea of having someone to take care of you when things get difficult. But you don't love me enough to have been faithful to me, and you don't love me enough to have chosen me when it mattered." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I heard you're seeing someone new," she said finally. "Yes, I am. She's wonderful. Are you happy?" I looked at Rachel again, who was now setting the table for 2, moving comfortably around my kitchen like she belonged there. "Yes, Amanda. I'm happy. Happier than I've been in years." I'm glad, she said, though her voice suggested otherwise. You deserve happiness. After we hung up, I stood in my living room for a few minutes, processing the conversation. 2 years ago, Amanda's call would have devastated me. Even a year ago, I might have been tempted to meet with her, to try to understand what had gone wrong between us. But now I felt only pity for her and gratitude for myself. Pity that she had to learn the hard way that Blake was exactly the kind of man I'd warned her about. Gratitude that her betrayal had freed me to find something better. Everything okay? Rachel asked when I returned to the kitchen. My ex-wife called. She's having some problems and wanted to talk. Rachel nodded, not seeming particularly concerned or jealous. That must have been difficult. Not as difficult as I expected. Actually, it was kind of liberating. We ate dinner and talked about our upcoming weekend plans. Rachel's kids were staying with their father, so we were planning to drive to Lake Erie for a mini vacation. It was the kind of spontaneous, carefree plan that Amanda would never have agreed to. She would have needed weeks of preparation and detailed itineraries. Later that night, as Rachel slept beside me in the bed I'd once shared with Amanda, I reflected on how much my life had changed. The house was different, my daily routines were different, even I was different. The man Amanda had betrayed was gone, replaced by someone stronger, more confident, and less willing to settle for anything less than genuine love and respect. 3 months later, I received divorce papers in the mail. Amanda was divorcing Blake, citing irreconcilable differences. I wondered if he had fought the divorce or if he'd been relieved to be free of the complications she represented. Around the same time, I heard through mutual friends that Amanda had moved back to Columbus and was living with her sister while she looked for work. Apparently, she'd been having trouble finding employment in her field. Word had gotten around about her affair with Blake, and the professional marketing community in Ohio was smaller than she'd realized. I felt a brief moment of sympathy for her situation, but it passed quickly. Amanda was reaping the consequences of her choices, just as I was enjoying the rewards of mine. The difference was that my choices had been based on honesty and integrity, while hers had been based on deception and selfishness. 6 months later, Rachel and I moved in together. Her kids, Emma and Connor, were 8 and 10 respectively, and they accepted me into their family with surprising ease. I found that I enjoyed being a stepfather figure, helping with homework, attending soccer games, teaching Connor basic construction skills in my workshop. Rachel and I talked about marriage occasionally, but we were in no hurry. We'd both learned the hard way that legal commitment meant nothing without emotional commitment, and we were focused on building something solid and lasting. One Saturday morning, while I was teaching Connor how to use a level, Emma came running into the garage. "There's a lady at the front door asking for Parker," she said breathlessly. Rachel and I exchanged glances. We weren't expecting anyone, and most of our friends would have called first. I walked to the front door and my heart sank when I saw Amanda standing on the porch. She looked older, thinner, and there was a desperation in her eyes that hadn't been there during our marriage. "Hello, Parker." "Amanda. What are you doing here? I need to talk to you. Please. Just 5 minutes." Rachel appeared at my shoulder, not possessively but supportively. "Is everything all right?" "Rachel, this is Amanda, my ex-wife." "Amanda, this is Rachel." The two women nodded at each other politely, but I could feel the tension in the air. "Could we speak privately?" Amanda asked. "Anything you need to say to me, you can say in front of Rachel." Amanda's face tightened slightly, but she nodded. "I came to apologize. Not because I want anything from you, but because you deserve to hear it. I made terrible choices that hurt you deeply, and I've spent the past 2 years living with the consequences of those choices." I waited for her to continue. "Blake was exactly what you said he was, a man who enjoyed the thrill of conquest but had no interest in commitment. He left me for a younger woman as soon as she became available. I lost my career, my reputation, and my self-respect because I thought I could have it all. I'm sorry things didn't work out the way you hoped," I said, and meant it. "But I'm not sure what you want from me now. I want you to know that you were a good husband. Better than I deserved. I want you to know that my affair had nothing to do with any failing on your part and everything to do with my own weaknesses and poor judgment. It was the apology I'd never received during our divorce proceedings, and hearing it now provided a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. Thank you for saying that, Amanda. I hope you're able to rebuild your life and find happiness." She looked past me at Rachel and the kids, who were visible through the front window playing in the backyard. "You have a beautiful family. I'm very lucky." "Yes, you are. And they're lucky to have you." She paused, then added, "Goodbye, Parker. I won't bother you again." I watched her walk to her car, noting how different she looked from the confident, polished woman I'd married 15 years earlier. Life had humbled her just as it had changed me. The difference was that my changes had led to growth and happiness, while hers had led to isolation and regret. "Are you okay?" Rachel asked as Amanda drove away. "Yeah, I am. Actually, I'm better than okay." That evening, after Rachel's kids had gone to bed, we sat on the back deck with glasses of wine, talking about our future. Rachel was considering going back to school to become a nurse practitioner. I was thinking about expanding my business further, maybe branching into residential development. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Amanda had chosen differently?" Rachel asked. "Sometimes. But not in the way you might think. I don't wonder if we could have been happy together. I know now that we couldn't have. We wanted different things, valued different qualities in a relationship. Her affair was just the symptom of deeper incompatibilities. Do you think she realizes that now? Maybe. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that her betrayal led me to you, to this life we're building together. In a strange way, I'm grateful to her for setting me free." Rachel smiled and took my hand. "That's very mature of you. It took me a long time to get here. 4 months after the divorce, I was angry and bitter. I wanted her to suffer, wanted Blake to hurt her the way she'd hurt me. But carrying that anger was exhausting. At some point, I realized that the best revenge was living well. 2 years later, Rachel and I got married in a small ceremony in my backyard. Emma and Connor stood with us as we exchanged vows, and my brother Jake flew in from Denver to serve as my best man. It was nothing like my first wedding, no elaborate decorations, no fancy venue, no extended family drama. Just the people who mattered most, celebrating a love built on honesty, trust, and mutual respect. I never saw Amanda again after that day she came to apologize. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she eventually found work with a smaller marketing firm and had started dating someone new, a divorced father who, by all accounts, was a good man who treated her well. I hoped it was true. I hoped she'd learned from her mistakes and was building something genuine this time. But mostly I stopped thinking about her at all. My life was too full of good things to waste time looking backward. Rachel and I bought a larger house to accommodate our growing family. She was pregnant with our first child together, a son we planned to name Michael. The construction business was thriving. Emma had joined the high school drama club and discovered a passion for theater, and Connor had developed into a talented athlete with dreams of playing college baseball. On quiet Sunday mornings when I was making pancakes for my family while Rachel read the newspaper and the kids argued about what movie to watch later, I sometimes marveled at how different my life had turned out from what I'd originally planned. The betrayal that had devastated me at 35 had ultimately led to a richer, more fulfilling existence than I could have imagined. I'd learned that love without trust was just elaborate pretending, that commitment meant choosing your partner every day, not just on your wedding day, and that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can also be the best thing, if you're brave enough to let it transform you instead of destroy you. My marriage to Amanda had been based on routine, comfort, and unexamined assumptions about what we owed each other. My relationship with Rachel was built on conscious choice, open communication, and the daily decision to build something beautiful together. The difference was everything. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel, so subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.